5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Space Business Podcast, where we investigate all the exciting ways in which people participate in the new space economy by conversations with entrepreneurs, executives, investors, and other members of the space family. I'm Raphael Rodkin, and I'm an investor in and advisor to space companies. Just as a reminder, this podcast is for informational purposes only, and nothing should be taken as investment advice. Sadly, I am not a rocket scientist, but I am an alumnus of the International Space University, which is also our partner in the podcast. Here's a short message from them.
The International Space University, founded in 1987 in Massachusetts, USA, and now headquartered in Strasbourg, France, is the world's premier international space education institution. It is supported by major space agencies and aerospace organizations. ISU offers the Master of Science in Space Studies program at its central campus in Strasbourg. ISU also conducts the highly acclaimed 2-month Space Studies program at different host institutions in locations spanning the globe, and more recently implemented the Executive Space Course, the Southern Hemisphere Space Studies program, and Commercial Space program. ISU programs are delivered by over 100 ISU faculty members in concert with invited industry and agency experts from institutions around the world. Since its founding, 33 years ago, more than 4,800 students and participants from over 100 countries graduated from ISU. Follow us on social media at ISUNet.
Our guest on this episode is Canadian actor Cas Anvar. Science fiction fans will know him better by his role in the hit TV series The Expanse, where he plays the Martian pilot Alex Kamal. Cas has clearly caught the space bug. He's a regular guest now at space events, such as the Satellite 2020 conference in DC, where I met up with him, as well as the very recent online edition of Yuri's Night. Our conversation touches on such diverse topics as science fiction previewing inventions in real life, The Expanse as an example of hard science fiction, his visit to Blue Origin, humankind's relationship with our own planet, the overview effect, and his own plans in space. I think you will find that Cas is a passionate ambassador for space, and I, for one, am very happy to have him in that role. In this vein, please enjoy my conversation with Cas. All right, Cas, thanks for doing this.
It's my pleasure.
We're here at Satellite in DC, which is one of the largest space trade shows in the world. I know you've been roaming around for a couple of days. You've watched some of the panels. You just watched the annual pitch contest.
Yeah.
What are some of your impressions?
I've been attending these science events probably for the last few years now since I've been doing The Expanse. I get invited to these things now a lot, which I'm extremely grateful for. Science has always been something that I've been very passionate about, space exploration as well. And now being able and being made aware of all these events and getting to see the new technology, the new developments, the plans that people have that are not just theoretical, but actual hardcore things being designed, implemented, and planned for, money being poured into it. It's quite astounding, actually. It's like the stuff of science fiction that is actually happening that no one knows about except you guys in this field. So, for example, I got to witness a pitch about this new satellite repair technology called Scout that are these little mini drones that get to go and observe visually each individual satellite out there and analyze it for damage and disrepair in order to prevent it from malfunctioning or repair it before it defaults and falls out of orbit or causes damage to another satellite. I thought that was amazing. I saw somebody pitching a product that was a self-deploying space helmet that you wear on a neck ring so that you can literally be flying a spacecraft in one of those very dangerous moments like takeoff or landing, where you're supposed to be wearing your helmet with the visor down in case something emergency happened. But obviously, when you're in the helmet, it's very restrictive. You can't see clearly. it's suffocating, and so being out of a helmet would be much more advantageous, except if there's an emergency, it takes way too long to put the helmet on. This thing deploys like an airbag. In the case of an emergency, you're instantly contained in a helmet and protected within a split second.
Yeah, I saw it, amazing, and as one of the judges pointed out, probably something that could be very interesting for the U.S. Space Force, or I suppose also for the Martian Congressional Navy, as life, as we said, very often life imitates
Precursor to the
art.
Goliath armor. Yes, I thought that too.
Is there anything that you have seen on The Expanse that you think should exist in real life, like in a similar way that, you know, we used to have stuff on Star Trek, like that looked like iPads?
Absolutely. Like I was just talking about this to the person who designed this helmet. I was saying that we have technology in The Expanse that is so realistic. I haven't asked the creators, I haven't asked the writers if this particular technology was based on a design, but I find it hard to believe that it was not. They call it a blister airlock. And the concept is that when you're working in space and you have all these ships in space, that there will come a time where you have to force open a door, or you have to cut through the hull to get in, like some kind of emergency situation where you've got to go into a pressurized vehicle or container and you want to preserve the atmosphere inside. So how do you do that on the fly? And they've created from their imagination this thing called a blister airlock, which is something that it's like a plastic ring with a cellophane type membrane, a very tough membrane that deploys after you cut through. It seals itself to the hull of the ship or the door that you're trying to force open, and then there's an acetylene torch or something that cuts through the metal, and once that door is open, the blister airlock releases oxygen to self-inflate, and that there's a second membrane that you kind of zip it's kind of like if you've ever done construction, when there's mold remediation or construction, they have like a double zipper thing that you go in, zip the one closed behind you, zip the thing open, and it's to preserve the atmosphere in your home so you don't let mold spores. So this is the same thing, only you're preserving the air in the ship. And it independently attaches to whatever surface that you're working on, so that you can cut through the ship, the air doesn't vent, and you can go through the ship in a functional airlock that is made out of membrane.
I must say, one of the things that has always impressed me about The Expanse, it is really what we call hard science fiction, in the sense that they try to like present solutions like the ones you mentioned, which are plausible.
Absolutely.
Like they don't just pluck something from thin air. And also, for example, I guess you are like the use of gravity you have on Mars, on Earth, in the belt. That's also like it's done in a very realistic way and very impressive. I suppose you guys must have.
I mean, that's what happens when your showrunner and head producer and writer is a physicist.
Understood. You're probably answering my next question. I was going to ask you whether you guys have expert advisors.
Oddly enough, we don't need to hire anyone as a consultant, because the three people at the top of the food chain are major science aficionados. One's a PhD physicist, and the other two are highly educated and informed science, space travel, space colonization, science gurus.
Yeah. Did you have to study and learn a lot for this role on the science side?
I came to the table with a lot of knowledge, because I'm usually the smartest person in the room when it comes to science in any project. I happen to be now number 4 or number 5 on The Expanse. I am not the smartest guy in the room. So I came with a lot of knowledge. And that being said, I learned something every single episode about science. Like, I had never known or heard about the Coriolis effect until I did the show, season 1. I had never known or heard about orbital mechanics in last season. Season 4, I had to do an episode where we have to tug, with the Rossi has to tug another ship into a higher orbit. My mind, you pull the ship perpendicular to the planet
Yeah.
straight away from the planet
Yeah.
in order to achieve a higher orbit. That's just the logic. And then they're like, no, that's not how
Doesn't
it
work
works.
that way.
you travel along the orbital path and
Yeah.
just increase your speed.
Yeah.
And then it's like it increases the orbit and you get further away. And I'm like, that makes no sense whatsoever. Like,
It's not very
practically,
intuitive. Yeah.
it's not intuitive. Like,
Yeah.
I just think fly away from the planet
Yeah.
and you go into a higher orbit.
Yeah.
But then when they explain it to me, well, that's not an orbit. That's directly away from the planet.
You need a lot of power.
So
if
you
want
need
do
to
something
actually
like
just
that.
increase your velocity, and that will expand your orbit, and you will then go away from the planet and be further away.
Yeah, I distinctly remember. I think it was probably in the second season when you had to hide out somewhere. Like you couldn't like put on the motor. You couldn't be seen.
Yeah,
the
I was,
Jovian-
and I
the
did.
Jovian moons.
I
You
was,
did, like,
I was
a bunch
hiding
of
behind
slingshots.
Silene,
Yeah.
and I had to do a slingshot.
Actually, I think a number of slingshots. So that's pure orbital dynamics.
Yeah, and here's a kind of a kudo to the fans and a kudo to our science team. When you're doing a show like this, there are certain things you have to do just to make it dramatic. There are certain things you have to do to make it interesting and fun to watch. For example, a space battle in absolute silence, which
Yeah.
is what it would be,
Yes.
would be boring. Like, you would have no drama.
Agreed. Yes.
So they add some sound, and they try to make the sound like it's coming from inside the ship. So the logic is, this is what you hear when you're inside the ship
Right.
and it's firing. So
Yeah.
they kind of justify it, but you still feel like you're seeing explosions and things like that in space. So dramatically, when they did the Silene episode where we did the slingshot back to Ganymede, they did a very dramatic kind of spaghetti loop-de-loop down to the
Yeah.
planet that they got called out on it from some of the highly intuitive fans, the knowledgeable fans, and said your path was way more complicated than it needed to be. You could have done it much simpler. And they went, yeah, we know. We just want it to look cool. They acknowledged that it was not the scientifically most accurate way to get down to the planet. And but that some things, they just do things just because it's cool.
Excellent. And coming back to real life, so you said, you're going to more and more of these events, and I think I saw you had a chance to visit Blue Origin as well with the cast.
The cast
How
got
was that?
invited to Blue Origin. That was really thrilling. I mean, obviously we have a very close tie to Blue Origin because
Sure.
of Jeff Bezos, and
Amazon,
he's the one who loves our show and kind of
And brought-
really helped
brought the
bring it back.
franchise, yeah.
He brought it back from a personal interest as well as the fans. But getting to see the ships, I got to sit in the capsule for one of the new Shepherds, or is it the new Glenn? I can't remember. It was the big one.
It's probably the new Shepard, the one they're going to fly tourists on.
Yeah, that's what it
New
was.
Shepard,
It's huge with big, beautiful windows.
Yes.
It was like being in a tourist attraction.
Yes.
That was exciting, and I got to see engines, and I got to see videotapes of what they're planning, and I got to hear a lot about what Jeff's vision was, which I have to say, personally, I was very much compelled by his motivations for why he's doing what he's doing in terms of his space colonization direction, his pathway about his basically build the road.
You mean getting people off the planet, preserving the planet?
Yeah, preserving the planet, because I think there's a misconception a lot of people had, including myself, was that he's trying to just get off the planet because he feels like we have to have a plan B. And in listening to him and listening to his people, he wants to preserve plan A. He's not looking for a plan B. He's like, the only solution is preserving this planet.
Yes.
In order to preserve this planet without stifling our industry and our creativity and our development, evolution, and growth, we have to get off the planet so that we maintain this blue gem that
Yes.
is our blue origin, is why he called
Yes.
it, and get the industry off the planet that's killing us.
Yeah, get all heavy industry off the planet.
Yeah, and I think that's a really brilliant way. You can't pollute space. Like, you can only pollute an atmosphere.
Yes.
If you have no atmosphere to pollute, then you're not polluting.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much stuff, there's so much space in space that you can send stuff into the sun or just send stuff out, and it's not considered pollution because you'll never see it again.
That's correct. I suppose some people are getting worried about like space debris as we're setting up those satellites.
See,
but
that's
then
but here
people are working on that.
But here's what I was starting to. This conference actually is making me. You were asking me what I'm learning here, and like, I have so many questions now about find out about what's in orbit, and everyone's coming up with these new things. And I saw Elon Musk is putting out his those 8 satellites that he just
The Starlink satellites.
the Starlink satellites, and I saw photos of some of the light pollution that's happening from the reflections. He said something yesterday where he said that the reflections were only caused by the satellites
Tumbling
in
initially.
in the initial orbital, and
Race,
now that
yeah.
once they settle, they're not going to. And he also talked about they're going to be starting to paint their satellites black and put shields on them to prevent reflections, and because the result of these reflections on the astronomers' observations is phenomenal. Like I have photos of the streaks
of light. Yeah.
of light, and it ruins all their observations in those small little windows of the universe. And we can't do what we've been doing. Like we polluted our oceans, we polluted our air, we polluted. I mean, we're surrounded by radiation and microwaves and RF waves, and like we're constantly just going. Let's just see what happens. And it's like I think we have to come up with a better strategy to growth and evolution and expansion. We're smart enough now that we know everything we do is going to have a resonant impact on human life and well-being and quality of life. So we need to anticipate that and try to, even though it's maybe a little bit more time-consuming, maybe a little more expensive, but in the long run, it's a long-term thinking goal. And that's another reason why I admire Jeff's perspective. He's always long-term.
Yeah.
Like he built this 10,000-year clock just for the hell of saying think long-term. He puts this 10,000-year clock that's cost millions of dollars to carve it into a mountain that's going to be self-sufficient. It's going to work off geothermal energy and reset itself by the stars, completely mechanical. No function other than telling time, but it's going to last 10,000 years.
Yes.
Just to say to future generations, think long-term. Plan for the long-term. Don't plan for a 20-year bubble, 10 years behind you, 10 years in front of you. If it doesn't affect my lifetime, it's not worth thinking about. That concerns me.
I think that's a feature of humanity, right? And I think another reason I admire The Expanse and the writers of The Expanse is that they're not running away from this type of issues, right? They're not pretending that this is going to be like a utopia.
It's not utopia.
It's like
it's not Star Trek.
It's not Star Trek, or at least parts of Star Trek. I guess there's some darker Star Trek series like Deep Space Nine, but
it's not the generic kind of the Federation has wiped out racism and money and healthcare and all that stuff and now the only things we struggle with is the other races.
Yeah, we're fighting only with aliens, not at all, right? In The Expanse, it's humans which are still quarreling with humans.
Yeah,
with the Belters
we're unemployed, 70% unemployment on Earth. We have more people than we have jobs. We are fighting for power. We're fighting for territory. The Empire is trying to hold on to its colonies and is not providing them with independence and is got that claim of ownerships and we're not respecting the working class, and we're exploiting the resources, and we're strip mining, and we're ravaging. And the terminology that I come up with when I look at how we're behaving now compared to the rest of the natural world, in my opinion, we should be operating like a parasite with our planet, because a parasite has a symbiotic relationship with a host.
Yes.
Because I don't consider a parasite a dirty word.
Right.
The parasite gains something from the host, and the host gains something from the parasite.
Right.
For example, the bacteria in our
guts. Yeah.
We nourish the parasite. The parasite helps us digest.
We could not live without our gut biome.
It's a symbiotic relationship. It's healthy. I feel we're behaving like a virus, and a virus is a very unsuccessful organism because it kills its host. And the only reason a virus survives, like the only reason the coronavirus is surviving right now is because it hops from one organism to another, and that's how it evolves. But in the case of my analogy, we only have one organism, which is the planet.
Yes.
There is no other place for this virus to hop. So once you kill this organism, it dies, you die. It's not a successful organism. Success is defined by being able to replicate and survive over the long term.
Yeah.
So we have to stop behaving like a virus and more like a parasite.
Do you think we're we're destined for a future like it's pictured in The Expanse, or is there something we can do
I think it's
about
very
that?
realistic. I think the only way to avoid that, because right now, like I've gone to multiple science conferences, and I see every science conference I go to, there's a military
Yes.
representation. There's someone there representing the military, and every time I listen to them, incredibly intelligent people, incredibly experienced, knowledgeable people, but it's always about we have to get it before they get it. If we don't do it, they're going to blah blah blah. It's such a us and them type of mentality, which I mean, there is no, like, when you experience the overview effect, there is no us and them.
Yes.
We are one organism.
Yes.
And we are different components. Every single one of these nations has skills. Everything, they have assets. You know, the Russians have superiority in certain areas. The Chinese have superiority in certain areas. We have superiority in certain areas. Canadians have certain. I'm a Canadian, so I gotta.
You gotta bring it.
We gotta bring it
Yeah.
up. We got the Canadarm.
Go
and
Canada.
we got certain things that we do better, and.
Yeah.
That's the strength of this species.
Yeah.
As soon as you make it into us and them, and then everyone in the warriors of our world are always like, well, yeah, but we can't afford to take that risk. And I'm like, honestly, you can't afford not to take that risk, because if you photocopy the behavior that we have now and the relationships we have now, you just transplant that to the moon and you transplant it into space, we're screwed, man.
Yeah.
We're screwed, because you know, there's nothing. Once we get, like, I mean, you guys are gonna. I can't talk too much about future seasons, but once we are out there, it ain't too hard to destroy this planet.
Right.
It is not a big deal to destroy the planet. It happened in the past. Like, we have an entire history of extinction
Yes.
on this planet.
I mean, the
that
history
happened.
of colonialism is not very encouraging, clearly.
But even just species, like mass extinction on this planet,
Yeah.
it's doable.
Yeah.
Nuclear or otherwise, it's doable. And when you start getting people that are trigger happy and egos and narcissistic type kind of mindsets of like, I don't care what the cost is, my views are more important than the good and health of the entire planet. Like, we're at a point. I think they call it the Anthropocene era. We are at a point where our species is capable of doing so much damage to the planet that it cannot recover.
Right.
We have never been in that position in the history of the world.
Yeah.
The human race has no species has ever been at a point that it can dictate the fate of the planet to the point of no return. And that's brand new. And we've kind of earned that medal. So we have to take that seriously.
And in fairness, it's what some people float as one potential explanation of the Fermi paradox, right? The Fermi paradox is like, why haven't we not heard from aliens when there should be like, billions of races out there?
Okay.
The explanation being that like, well, any civilization eventually hits a point like the one you described where it can self-destruct,
Yeah.
and usually,
Maybe they all did.
Usually it always happens.
So there's a whole bunch of
theory.
alien races out there that are
Nuke
basically post-apocalyptic charred worlds. And they're just dead, waiting to be discovered by historians. That's a sad...
It's season 3 of The Expanse, no?
Yeah.
Actually, parts of season 2. That's a dead alien race.
Yeah, you're right, actually. And they've nuked each other.
Right.
But both races aren't annihilated, only one.
Got you.
But yes, you're right. It seems to be, at least in our universe of The Expanse, that this personality trait of the ends justifying the means, and if I'm going down, you're all going down with me, seems to permeate all life in the universe. And I honestly don't feel it's necessary. I feel like there's enough intelligence, there's enough spiritual enlightenment in this world. We've learned so much from the spiritualists of this planet. When you go back to Zoroastrian and Hinduism, Buddhism, Christ, Muhammad, Moses, like every single one of these human beings has been preaching for thousands of years a spiritual vision. Doesn't matter who you believe in. They all preach the same fundamental message of one world, one planet, one species.
Yes.
And if we ever just allow ourselves to just be present enough to embrace that feeling and get over these paranoid, delusional fears of the other, which
Yes.
is hardwired into our DNA. The other is hardwired into our DNA, but we have evolved above that. We now know that, and we can supersede that hardwired programming, because we are the only species in the world that has imagination. Well, that's not true. There are some very highly evolved that create tools and things like that, but you don't see any of the wild kingdom trying to dominate the planet. They don't eat more than they need. They don't kill more than they need. They're always in harmony.
Yeah.
They want to breed, they want to propagate, they want to eat, sleep, and just be at peace and one. Human beings are the only ones who aren't satisfied with that. There's a restlessness in their spirit where they have to keep growing, like a virus.
Yes.
And I think we have to recognize that tendency and break that behavior. Otherwise, we're going to follow the destiny of the virus and kill our host and die.
And that's where something may be helpful that you mentioned before, the so-called overview effect. And for some of the people who are listening to us who may not know what that is, that's when the astronauts who've gone up to space, a lot of them have described this sensation you have when you see suddenly the Earth for the first time as a whole.
No boundaries,
of
no
its
borders.
Fragility,
Yeah.
like no boundaries, no border. Everybody's really the same. I guess it's also the same message as that famous quote from Carl Sagan. The tiny pale blue dot picture.
Yeah.
And Carl Sagan said something like, well, everybody you ever loved, everybody you ever hated, every war ever fought, everything on this tiny little speck. Mm-hmm. It's this kind of general, I suppose, effect.
Are you a fan of Dr. Seuss?
Yes, sure.
You ever read Horton Hears a Who?
Not that one, no.
Horton Hears a Who is about a little elephant that hears a sound in the universe, like in the sky, and hears a little voice going, "Help me, help me." And when he finally looks, he sees a speck of dust floating down, and the sound going, "Help me, help me," and he catches it on a dandelion. And then he looks close at it, and he sees a little telescope sticking out of the dust, and he looks through it, and he sees an entire world inside this speck of dust. And the person who's calling for help is a little who that is calling for help because his world is about to destroy itself. And it's asking for help from this elephant
Yes.
in his world to help this entire world that's on the speck of dust, which to him was a meaningless speck of dust until he heard the call. And it's a phenomenal allegory for, and this was written decades and decades ago. It's like a phenomenal allegory about self-importance and perspective, about don't take yourself so seriously. Do not think you are the be-all and end-all. Work, harmonize, and allow yourself to just be present and in the moment, because no matter how important and big and significant you think you are, you really aren't. We are just a speck of dust. We are just a little blue marble in this vast cosmos, and we are scuffling and fighting over ones and zeros
Yes.
in the data stream and bits of rock.
Yes.
And we could just live such a much more peaceful and fulfilling life if we eliminate the other, this concept of the other.
Yes, overcome the ego and I suppose the what they call the illusion of duality. And so on the overview effect, is that something you want to experience for yourself? In your lifetime?
Absolutely. I would
you
love
want to go
that.
up with Blue Origin or somebody else?
I would love that. If my boss lets me go, I'm going. I want to be on the first, maybe not the first ship, but I want to be one of the first people up there. One of the interesting things about being on the Expanse, I've always considered myself a huge science fiction fan and space travel lover. And in my mind, I always wanted to travel wherever they were taking me. I would go to Mars, I would go to the moon. But after being on the show, I'm realizing how absolutely unbearably hard space is. That's the joke in the writing room. Space is hard. And it's trying to kill you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with radiation, with gravity, with asphyxiation, hypoxia, with all the dysfunction that happens to your body with lack of gravity, distance and time. You just age, just travel time. It's just everything about space and space travel is an obstacle that's trying to kill you. and you're either too hot or you're too cold, or you're going to be bombarded with radiation and you die from massive cancer tumor growth. So that kind of discouraged me from going to Mars. So I won't get to see my backyard and my family, but but I'd go to the moon.
Yeah,
I'd go to the moon.
You can come back in like a few days.
Yeah, it's a
You don't
few
have to
days
wait
travel.
for a few months.
I can prepare myself physically, and I get to experience something that is, mind shattering and a spiritual and world changing. Regarding the overview effect, I kind of have a theory about humanity. I feel like every culture in the world, every religion in the world has some version of the creator, and that the creator created humanity in its image. And, in certain kind of modern contexts, we take that literally and we say, the creator made humanity in its image physically. And I don't know if I take it that literally when it says it created him in his image. I honestly feel like I observe patterns in the world. That's something I see myself as a bit of a generalist. I'm not an expert in anything other than my own field as an actor, but I do know a lot about a lot of different things, and I notice patterns. And I see all these patterns and all these repetitive things that are happening, like everything in the universe revolves around this model that goes down to the microscopic up to the largest things that we know, where it comes from atoms, the model we have for the atom with a nucleus and orbiting electrons, to the cell that is made out of these atoms, or the molecules that are made out of these atoms, the cell that is made out with a nucleus and orbiting organelles and mitochondria, and then you have an organism that's made out of all these cells, and it has a brain and it has organisms. Then you have a family unit made out of multiple organisms, and there's always a leader, an alpha in that. And then you have a community which has a leader, and then you have a city. And in the city there's a brain, and there's a city hall, and then you have transportation, and you have sanitation, and you have all and then you go up to the planet, which is revolving around a sun with its other, and then the sun is in a galaxy and it's orbiting around the black hole, and these galaxies are orbiting, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on. Like, the pattern is never ending.
It's what we call a fractal type arrangement.
Exactly. And I don't see that as coincidence. I see that as part of the equation that we haven't figured out yet.
Right.
And I see behavior. I see, for example, how come we are so obsessed with artificial intelligence? We're obsessed to create a machine that can function at a fraction of our own mind's capacity. Obviously, it's capable of computing things way faster and way more efficiently than we are, but the thought process of complex human thinking, of strategy, of watching human behavior, analyzing human behavior, of anticipation. Machines, we're obsessed with trying to create an artificial life form.
Yes.
And even to the point where we're fascinated when these developers put a human skin on them.
Yes.
And create a face and a mouth that moves with a voice coming out of it. And the more close to humanity it comes, the more fascinated we become. Are we not creating something in our image? Are we not trying? Why are we obsessed with this?
Absolutely, and the distinctions become very difficult, right?
And-
Because
and-
I could
and-
look at the human and say, the human, maybe we are already a machine, right? Just we're so used to thinking as machines as silicon and metal.
Exactly.
But maybe there was another creator, and
This
he
is-
shows a carbon-based chemistry.
This is what I'm saying, is that if the creator created us in his image, he included, or she included, or it included all of its own thoughts and essences and struggles, and we're creating artificial life now, just like he created something, and we're doing it to try and solve our problems. We're doing this AI so that it can solve problems we can't solve. Maybe we are a giant experiment that has been created to solve its own. Maybe this is from a race that is long extinct that created us because it self-destructed and killed itself, and then it created this as a fingers crossed kind of experiment to try and see if maybe my experiment of humanity can help us figure out our self-destructive behavior, and let's see if, and we're not doing so good. And I think that the overview effect is hardwired into every human being because it's somehow there already. And then when we finally get to see it, it opens these gateways and it triggers something that is almost genetically part of who we are. In the same way that if you throw a ball to a dog, it catches it.
Yeah.
It calculates a very complicated derivative function, a mathematical function, instantaneously, as fast, if not faster, to a computer. And you can throw all sorts of variables at him. You can get him running, you can throw the ball in the air, and he can catch it in midair. A computer would be very challenged to make that calculation, to spontaneously know the velocity, the vector, the gravitational forces, and then catch that ball in midair, in mid-flight, while it's launching itself. And yet a dog can do that, and it hasn't been trained. It doesn't know math.
Yes.
And yet it does. Mathematics is hardwired into everybody's brains and on a genetic level, on an instinctive level. And so I think this language of creativity or whatever it was is a mathematically based language that it permeates every molecule in the solar system, in the universe. And so I think the overview effect is kind of part of that world where we're seeing something that we all intuitively know but have not accessed. And then when it's shown to us, it overwhelms us.
So in order for humanity to benefit a lot from things like the overview effect, it would be desirable to get as many people up there as possible. I guess it's sort of like Jeff Bezos' vision.
Especially those who are influenceable and who have power and authority and the means to make changes. Absolutely.
How do you think people should, because the wider public, we're at a very specialized, very geeky space conference, right? But this is not the wider public here, obviously.
Right.
How do you think the wider public should involve themselves in space? How can they involve themselves in space? How do you want to?
It's a great question because I don't know how realistic it is. It's not going to happen in our lifetimes, but I love the idea that Blue Origin and SpaceX and Virgin are trying to commercialize space tourism.
Yeah.
I love hearing that the Hilton is trying to find a spot on the moon to create a hotel, because when you normalize space travel and you normalize and you make it affordable to be able to get out there and see the planet, it's going to be impossible for us to maintain this concept of borders and boundaries. If you can't see it, it eventually will stop to exist. It's just, it's happened over history where when you remove segregation, when you remove boundaries, when you remove things that have been entrenched in our minds, and you just remove them from our vision, we just get used to this, and humans are incredibly adaptable. If you look at people who have been put into concentration camps and like the survival skills that people have emotionally, they can survive the most brutal and unbelievable circumstances. So they're incredibly adaptable.
Yes.
That's why we've survived. Our brains are incredibly adaptable. So we will adapt to a new paradigm, which does not include nationalism and otherism and the paranoid kind of defensism. Once we are exposed to experiences that exclude that from our observation.
Yeah. So that's then getting back to a more optimist message, which than the one that we started on in The Expanse, where there's a lot of quarreling still going on. So let's hope that the overview effect and the space travel.
Here's the thing. This is what's going to happen, and this is my fear. Humanity is they're like adolescents. They're kids, and if some great crisis were to impact the world, whether it be a natural disaster or an environmental disaster or some kind of technological disaster or an alien invasion or some natural phenomenon, some extinction level event, you can be guaranteed every nation in the world would unite, combine their efforts, and try to save the species, because our survival instinct is stronger than our ego as a species. Right now, we have no necessity to save the species because we're all doing great. So now we've kind of reduced our DEFCON down to not saving the species, but save my country, save my borders. So we put all of our defensive, aggressive energy into hating the other. But if that other becomes an asteroid that's going to impact, or a natural disaster that we get warning of,
Or a proto-molecule.
or something foreign that we don't understand that is threatening the entire life of the planet, I guarantee you our defense perimeter is going to expand beyond our oneness, our selfness into our oneness, and we will unite. If we're capable of that, why do we have to wait? Why do we have to wait until we're on the verge of death? Why can't we say, oh, you know what, we would unite to save ourselves? Let's do it now while we're healthy and we're strong and we still have our electrical network around and we still have our computing power, because you guaranteed the first thing that's going to fall is our electricity, our grid. As soon as we get into a nuclear winter type of situation, eventually we're not going to have electricity. And then all our computing power, all our finances, all our money, everything's going to be wiped
Basically,
out.
all of modern life would be instantly
We're
gone.
so dependent on it. So right now we're healthy, we're strong, we're capable of incredible things. Why don't we effectuate the change now? Why don't we set up instead of a missile defense system that's to blow each other up, set up a missile defense system that's to take care of these asteroids that are eventually going to hit us. We had something passed by, I think, in the last few years that was within.
I think we frequently have asteroids that pass within the orbit of the moon, which is pretty damn close.
Yeah, and they're big enough to create a major catastrophe, but we're not equipped to break those up and deviate them yet. We should be. If we have a massive earthquake, or if our climate changes to the point where we drop our global temperature 1 or 2 degrees and we lose our polar caps and our water levels rise and we lose a lot of land mass and our entire biosphere changes and we lose fish and we lose our ability to survive in the way, like, why do we have to wait for that? We know it's coming. Why are our leaders like putting blinders on, being willfully ignorant? Like, I watched this documentary that Alicia Vikander narrated called Anthropocene. Stunningly, beautifully done and devastatingly terrifying. It was about a 2-year documentary covering different parts of the planet, time lapse. And it showed the South American rainforests just diminishing, like 70% on camera. It showed the polar ice caps reducing 40% on camera. It showed a coral reef, beautiful coral reef, colors and life, and then
bleached.
over the course of a year, bleached into white. Not a thing alive on that same coral reef. And it wasn't a projection. It wasn't CGI. It wasn't special effects. It was actual film footage that they did and they watched as our Earth died in front of them over a 2-year period. And it shook me. And that's when I kind of decided, after seeing that movie, I said, I need to put my energy, my effort, my voice at being on the show and the exposure it allows me to have. I need to find a way to save the world. And that's why I started coming to these conferences to educate myself, because I don't know enough. And I've been to a robotics conference, I've been to this satellite conference, I've been to the Mars conference in Palm Springs that Blue Origin hosts, I've been to the ISDC, I've been to so many of these things, and each one of these things I learn new things and I absorb, and everyone's on their path, everyone has their unique kind of specialization, and I'm kind of indulging in being able to see and cherry pick and just see the big picture of what's going on and how important it is, this work that's being done, because the work that's being done right now can save the world.
Right.
That's kind of the end game that I'm seeing. If there's this nucleus that we talked about, if there is a brain that guides all the limbs on a common purpose.
Yes.
And right now it's like an octopus that's got all 8 limbs disconnected and they're flailing in 8 different directions with no guidance.
Yes, and I think it's fantastic, and again, thanks for being here, that you're one of these people having the influence, that you help to get this message out about space and how it can be important for humanity.
I'm trying. I'm still looking for my my specific path on
Specific
how
role in all this?
on how to do this. Yeah, because like I said, I'm a master of, or I'm a jack of all trades, master of none when it comes to this world. I know a lot about a lot of different things, but I haven't found my kind of laser beam place where my voice can actually effectuate real, fundamental, noticeable change, and that's what I'm looking for. Yeah, save the world. That's my mission.
Cool. Changing tack a little bit, we always finish up these interviews asking about science fiction.
Yes.
And I know you said you were a
Huge.
huge fan, I think, since childhood of
Absolutely.
science fiction. What are your favorites? Star Trek or Star Wars?
I think if I'm going to have to choose, it would be Star Trek, simply because Star Wars is an epic fantasy. And it has some pretty good themes. It has some good messages to it. I think they're a little bit subverted amongst all the spectacle. Whereas Star Trek has some very, very, very powerful messages, human messages. A lot of the stuff that I was talking about today in terms of oneness and global humanization and the kind of the unity of mankind, it takes that and extrapolates it to the unity of living kind. And it does all sorts of stories to show us the hypocrisy of our belief systems. I still remember an episode of the original Star Trek where they saw this ship that was about to blow up, and they scanned it, and there was two living organisms inside that were fighting each other. They were killing each other, and the ship's about to explode. So they beamed the two people out into the Enterprise. And when they appear, the people that they saved are at each other's throats trying to kill each other, and they're half black, half white creatures. They're a race that is half black, half white, like black and white. And they're at each other's throats trying to kill each other, and so they separate them, they put them in the jail, and they're yelling and screaming. There's hatred in their eyes, and they're talking about, who are you guys? Why are you trying to kill each other? And one of them was a law enforcement official, a police bounty hunter that was chasing a criminal, a quote-unquote criminal, a terrorist. And the other person says that he is a freedom fighter trying to defend his people against the oppressors. So you have these two very different perspectives of who they are. And then they talk with such disgust about each other. And finally, Mr. Spock, who's absolute logical, kind of like pragmatic person, he looks at the two of them and he goes, forgive me for asking this question, but you talk about each other as if you're so different, and yet I look at you and I don't see, like, why do you hate each other? You're identical. And they both react with such disdain and contempt, and they're so offended.
Yeah.
And the oppressive one says, how dare you compare me to him? Can't you see? Mm-hmm. And everyone's eyebrows go up, and he goes, he's black on the left side and white on the right side. Mm-hmm. I'm black on the right side and white on the left side. How dare you? And you see Mr. Spock raise his eyebrow, and you see Captain Kirk kind of go, what the fuck? and it's just such a simple story, but the beauty of science fiction is they can make allegories with all this crazy kind of reality that doesn't really exist, and they can force people who might have these very ignorant opinions to look at something, get emotionally invested, and then suddenly realize they too have these prejudices. Even though they're ridiculing these two aliens that are fighting over nothing, they do it themselves. And then it forces you to look into a mirror in a way that traditional stuff can't do, because it's a little more finger pointing. Science fiction does it in a way that doesn't point fingers, and it forces you to do the work yourself. And I love that.
That's a very good point. Which one of the Star Treks is your favorite of the series?
The original series, I love the messages. Never get tired of it. My favorite dramatically is Next Generation.
Okay.
Picard is Patrick Stewart is just a phenomenal actor.
You're a Shakespearean actor as well, I think, right?
I am, yeah, and I admire him. I mean, I ran my own Shakespeare company for over a decade, and I'm trained classically, and Shakespeare is my passion. So the amount of Shakespeare that they integrated into the Next Generation, probably because of Patrick Stewart. I think he probably asked for all that Shakespearean stuff to be put in there, and they just ran with it. My showrunner, Narain Shankar, who is the head kind of boss on our show, was the writer on Next Generation.
Okay.
So I found the storytelling and the writing and the scripts in Next Generation to be the strongest of all of them. And it blended the original kind of spiritual message telling of Gene Roddenberry's original Star Trek with a dramatic, powerful, kind of entertaining storytelling with some brilliant acting, brilliant actors. It was a nice blend for me that some of the others didn't have as well. I love them all. Discovery I'm fine with. The movies I'm fine with, but I found that The Next Generation kind of had that magic.
Cool.
Balance.
Any other serious movies, science fiction books that you really love and why?
I'm very, very, very affected by Blade Runner, Alien, The Matrix.
Sure.
The Matrix.
Do you believe you might live in a simulation?
I mean, it really messed with my mind. Like the stuff that it talks about was so powerful. I still, the first movie, the second and third movie didn't have the same kind of depth to it. But the first movie really, the cinematography that they invented, the special effects, and the commitment, the emotional commitment of the actors and the storytelling, it really messed with my mind, and it still affects me to this day of trying to make myself be present and aware and not fall into this ability we all have of just becoming part of this flow and not resisting this current of this river and just losing our identity, losing ourselves, and just becoming complacent. It's so easy to become complacent in this modern world. And that really kind of woke me up.
I must say The Matrix I sometimes call it spiritual fiction because I think there's a lot of these messages we discussed before, like non-duality.
I agree. And good science fiction writing usually has that in there, like the Asimovs and the Bradburys and the Heinleins. And
have the spiritual element as well. I guess Battlestar Galactica as well has a strong spiritual
element.
element.
Battlestar, I'm a big fan of Battlestar. Even the old one, even the original series.
From the 70s?
Yeah. I mean, as hokey and as goofy as it was.
The terrible special effects.
It had the core, the heart and soul of it was strong.
Cool. Excellent. Cas, again, thanks so much. I brought you a little present.
What you got?
Last year I bought a bunch of these t-shirts
You
from
got me
Buzz
goodies?
Aldrin.
Get your ass to Mars!
Get your ass to Mars t-shirt.
Who's that? Who says that?
This is it's from Buzz Aldrin.
Oh yeah, that's right. It's Buzz. I love this. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I'm gonna wear that today.
And hope to see you at the next convention.
I will. I love this. Get your ass to Mars.
That's it for another nominal episode of the Space Business Podcast. If you like this podcast, please consider giving it a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform, such as iTunes. You can also follow us on Twitter at podcast_space. Also consider supporting the podcast at www.patreon.com/Space Business Podcast. If you have any feedback, including ideas for guests, and that may include yourself if you have an exciting space story to tell, or are interested in being a sponsor, or really anything else, drop us an email at spacebusinesspodcast@gmail.com. That's it. I look forward to seeing you for the next episode.